Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder podcast, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as bell notification icon to stay up to date to interviews coming your way. You could also follow me on mindbodyspirit.fm, where you could find the audio syndicated podcasts as well as a downloadable app that you can use to walk with or to go in your car and listen to as well. So it's just fascinating it's just wonderful to be on both video and audio these days and to reach as many people as we can. So do give a follow and do give a check. Today's guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is Christine Dorsey. Christine is a healer. She's a fellow near-death experiencer. And she will be sharing, her near-death experience similar to mine that she had as a young child and some of the lessons and experiences that she had on the other side and how it has influenced her life right now and a lot of the Reiki work and healing work that she's doing. So without further ado, we bring on Christine Dorsey on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Christine Dorsey, it's a big honor to have you here as my guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jacob. I'm thrilled to be here today on this beautiful day. Yeah.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. The sun's shining, and I know you have a big light to share with many of my viewers. But for my viewers who may not be familiar, I know you are incredible healer, and you have quite a profound story. But just kind of share a little bit about the current work that you're doing, and then I'm sure we could get into some of the why to really determine the how and the what of who you are to be.
Okay, great. So I am a Usui Reiki master. I'm an intuitive healer. I am also an advanced integrative energy therapy, an ordained minister, certified in tarot, certified in meditation. But really, my true gifts lie in when I am working on a client and doing that intuitive healing work. Spirit shows me stories, images, traumas, emotional areas where energy has been blocked and why that is. And it's very specific down to the hey, your calf is bothering you, right? And somebody will say, oh my gosh, it was just bothering me, and I'll say, yeah, that's your son that you're holding on in your calf, and spirit will tell me why. And I always say, I never talk through my sessions, but I always say whatever information I get is for the client. And so I'm just a conduit of information, not only to help them heal and move through that energy, but also to create awareness around what we're holding on to emotionally.
hmm
Yeah.
Beautiful. So and you could describe this maybe differently, but it seems like you do a lot of intuitive
Yeah.
healing. And I know
Yes, very
that's
much
been
so.
getting a lot of traction with medical intuitives, out there. I think of my friend Kimberly Meredith, who also a near-death experiencer like yourself too. Uh, I'm finding a lot of healers, they've had transformative type experiences, and I think there's a big correlation with a lot of maybe the passions or potentially the unfoldment of some of your gifts. Would you say what happened to you in terms of your trajectory as a healer?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting because sometimes we have these gifts that are locked away dormant, and then we have this event that happens, which is very transformative. And for me personally, it happened when I was 5.5. So I was very young.
Wow.
And so what ended up happening was, of course, at 5.5, you're, trying to explain the actual incident to parents back in the 70s, and they didn't, they were like, "Really? Maybe it was the medication." And, they couldn't quite understand what exactly happened. And I know we're gonna go into the story, but for me personally, and I think it was meant to happen this way, these gifts were held until I was old enough so that they
Mm.
could truly unfold and almost, grow like a flower, quite frankly. And just it was meant to happen, divine timing when it happened. And so, spirit gives you all these synchronicities and different coincidences that aren't coincidences, and that really assists in unlocking what's needed to be unlocked at the time that it needs to happen.
Wow. So Christine, we have certainly a lot in common. A lot of my viewers, come here to hear about near-death experiences.
Mhm.
But something that we're learning is NDEs just don't happen to adults. They could happen to infants like myself or young children,
Yeah,
and people can remember them. It's possible, certainly, to have full recollection of it. Before we get
absolutely.
into your NDE, I'm just wondering, for you, is this something that you always? I know for myself, I always like remembered almost every day of my life, but this is something that you always kept with you, or did it come through later in life through processing what happened to you?
So it was twofold. Initially, what it did was it shut me down because as I attempted to talk about it as a little child, you know, uh, when it's not easily received as a child, you shut down. So then it made me very quiet but very observant. And I always had a very good intuition. So I was very aware of that.
Mhm.
And I always questioned my mother. Again, I'm gonna go back to this was the '70s. There wasn't as much transparency, and I said to her,
Right.
"What happened in the hospital? Do you remember what they told you?" And she said, "They didn't tell me anything other than when you came out of, the operating room." And so it's like and I was like at that point, I was like, "I know something happened, I know something happened." I couldn't put my finger on it, right? So this is like 20s and the beginnings of 30s, and then the second half of my 30s, it really it was time. "Oh, no, you're gonna have full awareness and memory of exactly what happened."
Mhm.
And that's really when it flourished. Um, and but like I said, the whole entire time it was like other skills were being built, I'd say, throughout life, sort of honing that intuition, feelings about people, feelings about places and buildings and energy, not knowing how to define it, what to call it, what to label it. But it was really, I guess I'd say, it got locked away until it was ready to
Mhm.
come out. Yeah.
Ooh, wow. Well, I mean, it's certainly
Mhm.
congruent with, hard research from people who may be familiar in NDE world, like PMH Atwater, who really specializes in infant and child NDEs, will say that
Mm,
it takes around 2 to 3 decades to fully integrate to process. And, for you having it at 5 and seeming like understanding it, in your early 30s, like you said, it does makes sense. What was
yeah.
the event that allowed you to say, "You know what? This is an NDE. This is a thing. I gotta get this out there." When did that, sort of happen?
Oh, this is a good story. So, but I guess second half of my 30s, I really dove into spirituality more
Right.
so than religion. I was raised as a Roman Catholic. I didn't really practice. And there were some fundamentals. It wasn't like throw the baby out with the bathwater that I knew were right, but I knew the rest of it wasn't.
Mhm.
And I had some good friends and outlets that, I worked through yoga and meditation and group energy work. I was exposed to Reiki. I was probably in my early 20s. That back then, that's a I don't want to date myself, but let's just say it was a long time ago when people weren't talking about Reiki. I remember my sister-in-law doing Reiki on me, and I was seeing what she was seeing as she was working on me. And when she
Wow.
was done, we were like, whoa, like where'd that come? Wow.
Right.
I was very interested in Edgar Casey, and I'd say, side note, my mom also read all of Edgar Casey, so I feel like there was this lineage of intuition, and we all had this interest. Um, what would happen was I had gotten divorced from my first husband, and I was really diving into spirituality. Um, I was following my intuition more. I was meditating more. I was being more intentional. And I realized I was holding a subconscious block. And the subconscious block was me allowing myself to speak up. So, very much so, my throat chakra was closed down and allowing myself to understand that it's okay to be heard. So, I did some core belief work, which is like Dr. Bruce Lipton work with a lovely woman up in Maine and she works out of Maine and Massachusetts. And it was on the heels of that core belief work where I shifted that subconscious block that I allowed myself to finally open up. Again, divine timing. One thing led me to the next. And that was really my early 40s when I was like, I'm here. This is what happened. This is how it happened. These are the specifics. I
Mm,
remember this completely, because it's an odd thing to say, "Oh, by the way, guess what? I had a near-death experience at 5 and a half." You know?
mm,
People are like, "No, no, really?" It's just like, "Where'd that come from?" Just because I didn't talk about it for so many years. Um, so it was really that late 30s into, like, very early 40s, and that it was like, ooh, expedited personal evolution, I would say, of like, "Okay, unlock it now. Let's do this."
mm.
And it really sped up at that point. Yeah.
Wow. That must have been very cathartic for you having just something buried deep within for several decades and then finally allowing yourself to just release, that this thing. I mean, how was that for you when you first started talking about this with people? I mean,
Scary.
might have been scary, it might have been scary. Yeah.
Yeah, scary. I mean, the first thing was scary, what do you but I had I'm also a person, I have a terrible poker face. I can't really fake who I am. So this is who I was growing into myself even more. I was almost like a late bloomer if you want to look at it that way spiritually, but for me it was exactly on time. So I felt a little scared. I felt liberated. And what I also learned was your tribe connects with you. You do attract your tribe based on the energy that you stand in, and that's the truth. And I was willing to lose some people in order to gain the new people who I knew were the right people to be in my life.
Wow. So,
Yeah,
yeah, your vibe attracts your tribe, as I say, and
that's
certainly
true.
you've attracted quite a tribe with, a lot of the clients and people that you're influencing your story. And it's such a ripe time to be sharing it because, like you said, when you grew up in the 70s, that's when really, my friend Raymond Moody first, coined the term NDE in
Mm,
1975. Although near-death experiences, have been, heard of for thousands of years. You could go
yeah.
back to biblical times or Greek,
Mhm.
literature. So it's nothing new. But again, we're having more of a language and more of a universality. And I credit a lot of people like Dr. Eben Alexander, who has a medical background, who's came forward with his NDE, much like Brian Weiss, in terms of, past life regressions. I
Yeah,
think the education, the credibility, and the
yeah,
science to support this is really helping the cause.
yeah,
Um, but for you, it seems like you weren't defined by the story. You started to share it and learned how to define it.
yeah,
For my viewers, we're curious about your personal NDE story.
yeah.
And certainly I'll give you the floor as to what you like to share because I know my viewers are fascinated to really hear these things. And I think it strikes a chord of familiarity where we remember a part of ourselves is more than our body and, free and unencumbered. And I think that's why more people are tuning in because the soul is being heard and listened to. And these NDEs reflect something that is known deep within, I believe, all of us.
I agree. Yeah, I would love to share it. So I was in kindergarten. I came home with a stomach ache, a terrible stomach ache. And we thought it was a, stomach virus. So we lived in Queens, Mass with Queens at the time. We went to the ER on Saturday night. They thought it was a stomach flu and gave me more medicine. By Sunday morning, I really what I remember, and I remember this, I remember every bit of it, is I sat up and I was in the living room on the couch. I could see the sun rising coming through the window,
Mm,
and I felt the worst pain of my life, and I just started to scream. Couldn't
mm,
even cry. I just started to scream. And my parents, right then and there, scooped me up. They took me to a different hospital at the time, Elmhurst General. My father had a feeling. He kept saying, "I know this is her appendix. This is not a stomach virus. This
mm.
is her appendix." Drove the Volkswagen Bug back then in a very 70-ish Afghan, going whatever speed to the ER. I remember going in to the ER. I remember my father yelling at the nurse because he wanted her to know. He knew what it was, um, I then remember, which was very interesting, is being on a gurney and staring up at a man in a white coat. Now, what's interesting is that when I reflect on his accent, it was like an Israeli accent.
Hmm.
Very interesting, and he was very calming when he talked to me, and I felt that what he was telling me was true. Everything was gonna be okay. That was the last thing that I remembered. The next thing I remember was standing in the middle of a beautiful tulip field.
Hmm.
It looked like a rolling hill, and I could see tulips, multicolored tulips, and I was little, so they were tall, and I had no shoes on, and I wasn't cold, I wasn't scared. It was so beautiful. Now, the interesting thing I'll say is we didn't grow tulips. My mom grew
Hmm.
roses, so I don't recall knowing even what a tulip was other than how
Wow.
pretty these beautiful flowers were. And it was they were perfect in rows, just beautiful, all these colors. And standing in front of me was a man with no shoes on. I noticed he had no shoes on also. He had on, it looked like a robe with a hemp belt and a bad haircut. I thought his mommy didn't cut his hair the right way. He had some scruff, you know, and he had very kind eyes.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking he had eyes like my eyes, like a greenish blue. Um, and although he didn't say anything in that moment, I understood I was supposed to follow him. So he walked in front of me, and I just followed him down this path that was like the perfect path amongst all of these gorgeous tulips. And it went down a hill a little bit, and I remembered that.
Hmm.
And I remember to the left, the sun was setting. To this day, it's the perfect sun, I call it. So for me, the perfect sun is that like 4:30, 5 o'clock sun as it's starting to set. It's not too hot, but it's still beautiful and brilliant in the sky.
Hmm.
And that's what it looked like to me. In the distance, I could see many trees. So it looked like the woods. And as we continued to follow this path, it cleared up a little bit. And in front of us was this enormous tree. The most perfect tree. If you were a little kid, you wanted to climb a tree because in my mind, I was, that's what I was associating everything with, you know? Wow, this is the best tree I could climb at 5.5. I love this tree. And we stopped in front of the tree and he picked up this very thick book. Um, the book did not have a normal hardcover. The pages were not even, they were it was like one page was this way, one page was that way, and they were very uneven, made of a different fabric, I almost wanna say. It was a different material than I had seen in a book at that age. But he flipped the pages, in my face and it, made a little fan, and I remember I giggled, and he said, "You too will know this book one day." And I just smiled, and I just thought that was okay. And then he put the book down and he held my hand and we walked over to a beautiful brook of water. And I do remember the rocks in the brook, when you can tell when they're very rounded. It's a very old brook. That's when every rock was perfectly rounded. And we just looked at the water and we just stared at the water. And the next thing I remember was, being in the hospital. I was in ICU for 12 days. I was in for 17. My appendix had burst and I had gone
Hmm.
septic.
Wow.
Yep.
So your father's intuition was and logic, if you want to call it, was pretty spot on. Well, thank goodness you're here sharing this story and you have memory of it. Certainly a lot of
Yeah.
questions. I mean, the first question that comes to me is, who would you say that man was to you? Was it a spirit guide? Was it JC? Like, not
Yeah.
not this JC, but another JC. I don't know if that was me. I mean, I'm more of a clean shaven type, so I don't think that was me.
I don't think it was
Um,
you. Actually, it's funny you're saying that. So a few things. I didn't inquire about that and I went to a very good medium actually out of Connecticut. And we talked about it, and I didn't give her all the specifics. I gave her a bit of the story. She finished it, and it was actually John the Baptist, his cousin.
John the
And I have
Baptist. Wow.
John, yep, because I knew it wasn't Christ. I knew it
Mm,
wasn't, but I just didn't know who he was. I wasn't afraid of him, but I wasn't sure who he was.
mm,
And when I there's so many crazy things that happened when I had full awareness, but just a side note to the spiritual, if anybody wants to look up the spiritual meaning of a tulip, it's like pure and perfect love. It's perfection. Of course, it's perfection, right? It's
mm,
you couldn't even make it like, oh my goodness, it's amazing. So tulips are very special to me. I got a tattoo of a
wow.
tulip right here. They're obviously they hold a dear place in my heart. Soon after I had gone to this medium, and again, this was in that phase of really being aware, clearing my throat chakra, getting ready to talk about this. I had taken a trip to New York City around Christmas time. This is just to support what with John, what happened, which was interesting. And I don't know if you've been in New York City at Christmas time, it's very crowded, right?
Mm,
It's just crowded. So we went over to St. Pat's Cathedral because I like to go in there and light a candle for my parents and just, stand and look. Usually you can't get in because it's, again, so crowded. And very odd, it was not crowded. It was a week and a half before Christmas. We went in and sat in a pew. Odd again, and just sat and just felt the energy. And I said, well, let's just walk the Stations of the Cross. I thought, I've never done that. We have the opportunity. Let's just do it. So we walked through, we walked around, and somebody had mentioned that behind the altar was the shrine to Mary. And we
mm,
stepped behind the altar. We saw that. That was beautiful.
wow.
And then just past that on right, the next statue sitting there was all by itself, the statue of Elizabeth.
Mm,
And I walked over not knowing it was Elizabeth, and I started to read the story of when Archangel Gabriel came to Elizabeth and told her that she would have a son who would then baptize the Son of God. And every hair in my body stood up.
mm,
Well, that was John's mother. And I just I was like, "Wow, okay, spirit, okay." I was like, "Okay, duly noted." Yes,
mhm,
it was just it was really incredible. Um, and there's been other sort of incidences in life that have, you know, pointed him out or where I'll feel the guidance. I do feel very much he is a guide in my active waking life um, to this day. And
mhm.
he was a guide then.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Do you feel like you might have known this through, like, a past life? Because, there's billions of people on the planet. I mean, for that, it's quite a unique guide for you, but I'm wondering, what the maybe personal connectivity that you might have, to John the Baptist. I don't know if you've explored, PLR, past life regression type stuff, or just kind of, like, pondering to the universe, what's the connection between my soul and John the Baptist? I'm just
Yeah,
curious. Yeah.
I did actually, I have done 2 past life regressions, 2 or 3, and, in one of them, what came up was that we were related. We were family.
Uh-huh.
So we were within the same family. And so going back to what I thought was interesting is I thought he looked like me. Like I just remember we had the same eyes.
Mm.
Not again, I hit 5.5. What do I know? I just remember, oh, he has eyes like me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? And it was, really mind-blowing. But again, it's this information that I hold in my heart, of like, we are really connected, and it's really beautiful, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as they say, the eyes are windows of the
It's a
soul.
soul. Yeah.
Certainly. And yeah, I certainly believe that there's a ray of light within the eyes that connects, certain rays of God or soul family members together. I think we're all part of this soul tribe, but sometimes if you look deeply within, you could find more of that strong connection that we might have through
Yeah.
karmic ties. And it seems from what you're saying, like and John had this incredible tie. What I'm always fascinated with near death experiences, yes, there's there's a uniformity to it, with a lot of ways, with
Mhm.
euphoric near death experience or potentially distressing near death experiences.
Yeah.
But amongst that, there's nuances,
Mhm.
and people have just different experiences. And so for you, it's very much specific towards the flower realm and tulips and all that kind of stuff. But I'm wondering, like, what type of lesson do you feel humanity should learn, from that? And B, like, why do you feel you were shown that? What was that message for you on a soul level to see, just this beautiful, I'm trying to find the right word for flowers in a fancy way, but,
Yeah.
just the floral depiction and engagement of the other side.
I think for me, and taking everything into consideration at that age, um, that was their I would believe their way, least of like most beautiful, easiest, most appealing way to express and infuse that love. I mean, what better way to me, I mean, I don't know, there would be better ways, I'm sure. But for me in that moment, that experience was stepping into complete beauty and peace and and the fun of fields of flowers.
Mm.
Freedom, love, uh there was no time, there was no cold, there was no wind. I didn't have shoes on, I didn't care. There was no worries, there was no pain. I was in immense pain, and when I woke up, I was in so much pain because back then, they didn't have the IV medication, so whenever I was in pain, they would give me a shot in my leg, which I remember, and when I came home, I was so miserable to be back here.
Mm.
And I had sent along a picture of my kindergarten picture where they sat with me and tried so hard to get me to smile. And that picture is the best smile you got out of me. And I'll never forget the photographer said, "How come you won't smile? What 5-year-old doesn't smile?" But I was not happy to be here. I was
Mm.
still in the energy of that bliss. Um, and so going back to your original question, when I think about those tulips, it's perfection, it's perfect love, especially now. If we could really tap into that, globally, collectively, with our neighbors, with our friends. We used to be able to disagree. Now people are just it's not just disagreeing. It's like you're going at war. Please, we don't need to be doing that. What we need to do is tap into that love. We really need to be tapping into that.
Yeah. Oh, sure. And just as, all the toxicity could spread, right, this love could also be a virus that we could inject in the best possible way to have unifying components. Uh,
Yeah.
and obviously we mentioned today's time, but just to scale back, because just out of personal curiosity, I'm sure for viewers, it seemed like a lot of near-death experiencers experience a degree of trauma or a tremendous, at least a tremendous adjustment from that realm of unconditional love and warmth, to
Yeah.
waking up on a cold hospital bed. So I could certainly understand your frustration, and anger, which sometimes could be a trauma related, symptom as a therapist, or just feeling, the adjustment. I'm just wondering for you,
Mhm.
I know a lot of near death experiencers are told, hey, it's not your time, you have more work to do, or they're given autonomy where you say you could stay or go, which is, I feel, a lot less of the percentage.
Mhm.
I'd estimate probably 70% of people are usually told, hey, it's not your time, you have more work to do. For you, was it a choice that you had to come back? Some people don't remember that, but do you feel that there was a decision to come back, or were you told, hey, keep on, continuing this life?
No, so there was no choice given, but I don't think there was ever going to be a choice. I
Mhm.
think this experience was meant to almost like plant the seeds of gifts that I would receive there when in that experience that were then going to grow with me. Because the way he showed me this book and telling me that I would too know this book one day, it was like, "We're giving you this information,
Mm.
and you're gonna use it." And
Wow.
so that and it's interesting, so the correlation because I'm a very good astrologer out in Colorado that I work with, and so when she looks at my chart, she said, "Christine, it's so interesting. At that age when you had the NDE, all of these planets step forward, like, to
Mm.
the month. Like, it's amazing." So,
Mm. Oh,
it
wow.
was it's like, "Nope, here it is," for all of the, synchronicities or the complications or the
Mhm.
amazing universe and how it works. Um, it's aligned that I was going to have this experience, go through it, receive awareness around it, receive these gifts, and then I was gonna take that, and when the timing was right, I was gonna, use it for good and
Wow.
serve, you know? Yeah,
I mean, it's very specific imagery that you had with the tree in the book, and I'm just wondering, for
yeah.
viewers, A, was the tree I mean, was a book rather, would you say that was the Akashic Records book? Like, what was that? And also, maybe the symbolism of the tree in the book that you learned that viewers could understand better in terms of some of the messages and lessons and
Yeah.
maybe wisdom from your NDE.
So I believe that that was the tree of my life. The beauty of that tree was my life that was gonna be unfolding, that I was looking at, that I was in awe of. The book it's so many different things that I think about. Is it the book of gifts that I was given? Is it the book of knowledge and awareness of all time? Is it all lifetimes?
Mm.
I'm not so sure. I think it's a little bit of everything.
Mhm.
But I will say it's meant to be used all of that knowledge in this lifetime. So, I think that's my focus. I try to focus on what I intuitively have picked up from that book, what I continue to pick up. It's almost like pages get turned over time and more information comes through, you know?
Mm. Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
and
It's
applied now. Yeah,
it's an unfoldment. It's not like a stagnant
that's right.
set of belief systems. It seems like something that's influencing your
Yes,
every life and your everyday life and something that's informing it. But
yes,
the tree is obviously very symbolic. You think of the tree of life, but also just what is a tree? It has its roots
yep,
anchored deep in the ground and its branches and its canopies, going towards the sky, and it's representative of our essence, where it's very important, to be grounded, to be rooted in our
yes,
essence, and also connected to the upper ethericals. And certainly, it seems like there was a value placed on at least nature and plants and flowers. And it seems like we've gone away from that in our society, where we've been so manufactured in how we live, and
absolutely.
everything has to be bought. And uh, I mean, what did you really learn from nature when it was shown to you in its beauty on their side, that humanity could value more? What are we missing right now? Because it seems like we're not as in tune as possible, and we almost need a scientific explanation now when you go outside, or like instead of going outside, we say, I'm earthing, I'm getting my negative ions. It's not like I'm taking a walk, and everything's a
Yeah,
whole intellectual explanation, which is great for left
yes,
brain people. And I'm glad the science is catching up to validate this. But
yeah.
yeah, what could humanity learn more so about the beauty of nature that you saw, and how we could integrate nature?
Um, it doesn't have to be simple, or excuse me, it doesn't have to be complicated.
Complicated.
It has to be simple. It has to be doable. Bring it back to when you were a little kid. Forget the phones.
Mm.
Bring it back to when you were a little kid, outside playing or on your bike or at the park or down the street with your friends, on the earth, in the earth, grounding, but being outside, being in a community sort of area, whether that's a small group of friends or your friends at school. You know, those are the times when you feel really good, if you were to think back. And I'm like, I agree with you on the science. Going to the beach, great. Okay, we know all the research on the hertz vibrations of the ocean, of the
Mhm.
seagulls, of everything, of the waves. But what did you feel? You just feel good and you feel really grounded. You have to go where your body is telling you energetically that you need to be. And you always feel better when you're out in nature. That is, spiritual source right there at its best.
Mhm.
Put your feet you wanna put your feet in the grass, great. You don't wanna hug a tree, hug a tree. Just get outside, get in the sun,
Mhm.
get away from these screens. If you wanna listen to this podcast on a walk, great, get outside, you don't have to watch it, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I always personally feel better, and I have to tell you, in my practice, when we do, group events or even when I'm doing a one-on-one client, consultation, I talk about the value of being connected spiritually and listening into your intuition, but the absolute necessity of grounding down into the earth. And even in my office, I have a lot of natural wood, cedar, and whatnot. And when you come into my office, you feel like you've stepped into a true healing container because I want people to understand that this exists outside,
Oh,
in
yeah.
here and outside. Yeah.
When you were with the flowers, I'm just curious, did you were you able to smell them? Was that like an olfactory sensation that you had on the other side, or was it more of just kind of seeing them?
No,
Um,
it's funny. I did not have that sensation of smelling the flowers. Um, I you know, that this just wasn't it. I was
mhm,
more, in tune to the color
mm,
and the vibration. The color was so brilliant. Really, they vibrated the colors. It was the most brilliant colors you ever saw that I'll ever see
right.
until I crossed back over, and I'm in that dimension, and it was spectacular to be in that vibrational energy. Even the sun was spectacular, the color and the warmth, but I could feel the warmth, I could just feel the warmth. So I couldn't smell, but I could feel the warmth. I heard the
So
water, so I could hear that. Obviously I saw, and I felt the earth as I was walking. Yeah.
feel the earth move under your feet, as Carol King would
That's
say,
right.
right? But,
That's right.
shout out. Yeah. I just
Yeah.
saw James Taylor in concert 2 weeks ago at the
That's awesome.
beach, and he was able to
Really?
give a lot of, homage to Carol, which is great. I know they work quickly, but anyway, off topic.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I'm great. as a fragrance guy, I'm so, it's so, great to hear that you're incorporating that in your practice. As we know,
yeah.
the nose and the eyes very much related to the brain, and so it's no wonder clients come into your office and
Yeah.
they smell, maybe the aromatherapy, whatever's in there that just
Yeah.
feel, a lot
Yep.
more grounded, relaxed. You
Yeah.
mentioned obviously, the kindergarten picture, coming back from this was pretty hard.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, was there a point where it was no longer pain that you felt from this? Was there a time where you started to, that you could point to that you started to embrace, that in other words, the pain transitioned to purpose? Like, where was that point of time throughout your life? Because imagine it must have been pretty complicated,
Sure.
having this experience at such
Yeah.
young ages. I could relate to.
Yeah. So, in that moment during that time frame, it took me until probably the following September to feel like I wanted to be around people. I mean, other than my family. I didn't even wanna go outside, I remember that. I was just afraid. I just had all of this fear of being here. Um, but once it was September and it was the new school year, I remember getting better and meaning emotionally feeling a little better just to not focus on what happened, and that's really when I locked it away,
Mhm,
and I was like, "Well, okay, I'm just gonna be a little kid," and I played. But going back to, when I really unlocked these gifts is the beginning of having that experience with my sister-in-law doing Reiki on me, which was the beginning that was, like, 20s, I was in my 20s when that happened. So that was almost like the tap at the door, like, "Oh, there's something here. There's something
mm,
in here," Then once I got into the 30s and I really started to explore spirituality is when everything started to shift. I was for a very long time, I had a business, a wellness consulting business. I am a certified health coach, and I remember just feeling the calling of needing to focus more on the spiritual. And I was like, that was in my 40s when I had worked on the throat chakra. And, once COVID kind of came and shifted a lot of people, their practices, if they were self employed, I finally said, no, this is it. I'm diving in. And that was a big deal. That was a big deal because I said, "I'm literally taking my business I've had for multiple years, and I'm going to do a 180 with it. And I'm not only gonna deal with the practical end, I'm going right to the spiritual end and emotional end," which I always brought in anyway. And I would have clients that I would see in my regular, daily practice, and sometimes they would just come in and check in with me, and if they didn't see me and they saw somebody else, they would get upset, and I thought, "Well, it's only really a quick 15-minute appointment." What I was just couldn't understand that. But what they would start to tell me was when they were with me, they would just feel better. There was something happening, and so there was, like, I was emitting some kind of healing even in our session that weren't yet bringing in all the spirituality that was still getting ready to step into.
Wow.
And and I needed to take a look at that because that was right in front of my face, and that it's so funny what the mind will do. Like, "Oh, it's just something else. It's not really, it's not really me." And it was like, well, it's my energy. It was my energy. And that's what was happening. And they were feeling the healing already coming off of me naturally. Once I really dove into, becoming attuned to the Reiki symbols and IET and whatnot, um, I really created my own way and stepped into that spiritually. And I have my own team and my own conversations and my own blessings that I put around my clients. And I feel very good about that because I know we're doing the best work we can. Me and my team, my
Wow.
spiritual team. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like you're certainly every day, understand different pages of that book, giving over to others. And obviously, your intuition is a big part of your work and guiding your work. Do you feel that when people come to you, that energy that they may feel also may be a part of your near-death experience, where maybe that is something that they feel like this part of heaven that you've connected to in this life? I'm just kind of curious, like how much of that energy has been changed from your NDE or things that people feel around you.
Yeah, it's funny. I never thought about that until about a month ago.
Mm.
But I think you're right. Number 1, I think you're right. Number 2, I had somebody, again, it's one of these things where somebody has to point it out to you. Someone who's very intuitive and very spiritual, and she came in, she had a session, and I've known her for quite some time. But she looked at me, she said, "You've like God eyes." I said, "What?" She goes, "They're like God eyes. They're different." And I went, "Oh, I never heard that before." But but it's like to your point where you're saying, I'm like, "Oh, that's so interesting that she would be uh, able to see that," And obviously, I think to your point, it's like, yeah, I think that is some kind of a level of energy in that experience and love that comes off.
Yeah,
How could
totally.
it not? How could it not, right? How could it not
Well,
happen?
on an electromagnetic basis, I mean, near-death experiencers, for viewers, we tried 2 end of ears like a couple months ago. We tried an interview and the Wi-Fi was just going crazy. Now, finally, it's working. I
Yep.
don't want to jinx it to use a 90s
Yeah.
term, but
Yeah.
on an electromagnetic way, end of ears are frequently
Yeah.
disturbing a lot of technology. And so I'd
Yeah.
imagine the energy that we may emit from what we had and the frequencies we might have touched could certainly be picked up on from others. But yeah, I
Yeah.
fully hear and understand what you're saying regarding some of the transformation. Now, you mentioned like finding your voice. It almost kind of reminds me of that movie. What was it, like The King's Speech, where eventually he's able to find his power. You mentioned the throat chakra, which is an advanced term for some of my viewers, but some
Yeah.
might know that, but really it's just vocal cords, and we've had guests on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder even talk about ways to find your voice. I mean, one of the hosts guests that we had was a gentleman named Stuart Pierce, who was a vocal course for Princess Diana of Wales and Margaret
Oh, wow.
Thatcher, and to name a few. So yeah, he really has ties to some high prolific people, and really finding their inner voice and how profound that can be. But
Yeah.
for your work and for others listening, how could people really find their voice and what is the value of it? Because my philosophy, I feel most people either hide themselves away or they talk from over here. They don't fully incorporate, the deep voice of their soul. It's just kind of like an energetic block as to where their voice is coming from, and it doesn't seem to be like an authentic, organic source of origin. It seems
Yeah.
regurgitated or just
Yeah.
kind of limited. So for you, I'm just wondering, energetically, physically, spiritually, for viewers listening, how could they find the voice, and why is that important in this life?
Okay. So there's a few, obviously, there's a few that you have to know why, right? There's what's going on behind the
Mhm.
scenes. You have to know the root cause of that. And very often, when you have an issue with the throat chakra, you're also having an issue with your sacral area. So that's your creativity.
But the sacral chakra is
Just
where?
below the belly button, just above sort of like the pubic area. So
Yeah,
that create like, the ovary area of women and the men, not men,
yeah.
but you know what I'm saying. So it's that in between area, and that's creativity, right? So we want to create in life, we want to express in life. It's also, I believe a lot of times there's a lot of fear behind projecting what's really in our heart.
Mm,
So it's peeling back those layers of what's going on in the life, what's going on in your daily life, what's going on with fear, what's really happening. So you have to get down to the root of what are we dealing with here. I'll give you a perfect example of a client I had yesterday. When I got to her throat chakra, what I felt and saw was sort of like these blocks. And what that was telling me, when I say blocks, I mean like blocks of rock. Everything that she communicated came out in a certain way. She was very, uh, like you would say, she was thinking a lot about what she was saying instead of just speaking from the heart. So we had talked about that, and I asked her why. And it centered around fear. She was afraid if her family knew how she really felt, they would look at her differently. So we had to talk that out a little bit. I worked it out energetically, and I reminded her to continue with this type of energetic work. Now, you can do that through an energetic healer, you can do it through tapping, you can do it through many different modalities.
mm,
I'm not just sticking with those two, by the way. I do believe in tapping into the core belief of how that happened, why that happened eventually, but sometimes people aren't ready to tap into that yet. So we do the work as we can. So as we start to peel away those layers with each session energetically and move the energy, I also encourage them to bring in the color of that chakra. So they want to bring in the energy of that color. So that's a beautiful green. So I'll encourage them, have plants around, wear green, like do wear a nice green scarf. Like that also brings in the vibration of what we're trying to support here also. So we're trying to get it from a few different angles. And be gentle. You know, if you're feeling like you get a lot of sore throats, which a lot of times will happen in that area, use a little organic honey, like use some nice chicken broth, organic chicken broth, like really understand and give yourself some grace. Don't be so hard on yourself, and just do a little bit at a time. Do what you can, what feels good,
mhm,
because eventually it will eventually get better. And it does. It
mm.
absolutely does. It
Wow.
eventually evolves its way into a better situation where they're speaking more of their truth. And all of a sudden, they're becoming more creative. They're able to step into projects they want to do because, we need to communicate about our creativity too. So it's so amazing, right? We think like, oh, we're just these physical, bodies, but all this energy is required for us to flow properly. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just to get that flow going, get out of our heads so much, get into our hearts with love,
Mm,
not with anger, with love. Let's work that through and get that body moving.
mhm,
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in know thyself. So know who you are, know how you work, know how you tick, understand certain things of what you may have to work on in this life based off of your soul imprint and your lessons in this life. We're not all the same. And understand you might require a little bit more work in this area, and other people may require a little more of this. And that's okay. It's all right. We're all work in progress,
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, it as a therapist, it seems like the new wave in therapy is somatic based or within the body, where
Yep.
actually people have sessions and not really say much, but talk about a certain sensation in the body, what you're feeling in the body,
Mhm.
and I think that's that kind of Eastern approach. And I think for your work, it seems like, obviously Western medicine has its value, but it also has its blind spots and its limitations. It doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily go to the root and what's going on deep within. It seems like a lot of your work is somatic based, energetic based, and
Mhm.
it's empowering people where you don't have to take this pill, to feel better. There's an organic flow that you could connect to in your own source of healing that you could tap into. And it's very
Absolutely.
empowering instead of, having to, be dependent on, professionals or external factors,
Yeah.
rather turning within and going to the root cause
Mhm.
is very much functional medicine based, and and I think that's a beautiful, empowering practice for our clients, and having that balanced approach, to Western and Eastern. I think hopefully should be the new paradigm,
Yeah.
in terms of our outlook towards mental health and medicine,
Yep.
and across the board, that the balanced approach. Now, Christine, I'm just wondering for viewers, listening. Um, we obviously comprise of maybe 5 to 10% of the population who had near-death experience, and that's probably growing as we say, the incubation of life and, life, as we say, I don't even say death, is, increasing with medicine. But for
Mhm.
those who haven't had near-death experience, I often find that they may feel, "Oh, you've had this, but I can't relate to it," or there's not this thing for me to hold on to. There's this great story, but, how could I make sense of this? And I'm just wondering for you, any nuggets that you have to share about, maybe what you learned, for those who might not have had a near-death experience, maybe viewers who had a near-death experience and understandably are, fascinated by your, story that you had. What are some of the biggest, key takeaways that you could
Key
bring with
takeaways.
you, for others
Nope.
to really incorporate in their everyday life?
Uh, there's no fear. There's pure love and, um, joy. It was really no fear, pure love and joy. That's what I felt. And you would even say, as a little kid, I should have been really scared, right? I should have been
Mhm.
terrified, but there wasn't an ounce of fear. And the level of love and joy and peace that was there was incredible.
Mhm.
Absolutely incredible. And that's what I always even go back to and think about when, things are hard or we're going through stress, personal stress. I
Mhm.
just think about that beautiful, like, that love and that peace and that joy that existed there, and that there is no fear. And I do deal with a lot of, grieving parents, actually, interestingly enough. So we do talk a lot about that, about the love that exists there, the joy, the bliss, and there's some exchange that we have, and it brings them comfort to know that, that I've popped into a spot where their children are at the moment, and I've been able to pop back over here, and hopefully I can share and serve in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just paramount, the associative component of beliefs and our outlooks and our behaviors. And from what you've had firsthand, it gives the polar opposite of a morose viewpoint towards, the afterlife, and your firsthand living proof that, it's not a scary place. It's okay. I've come back here. I'm
Yeah,
living proof that there's only life. And, hopefully that could allow people to, process their grief a little bit differently, as we know belief and grief um, go hand in hand. So, um, so yeah, that's certainly a part of things. Um,
yeah,
did your, near death experience, it seemed like a little bit of a medical miracle, if you will, too.
yeah.
Did How did that change your outlook in terms of, I guess maybe the work that you do, or medicine, maybe illness? I'm just wondering for you, is that a component in the work that you do where you just kind of saw the body and the physical condition as something else that maybe, Western medicine isn't seeing?
Um, I think it again, this is one of those things that where I had, exposure to certain, opportunities that really cemented that experience, and I worked for a German company that had created a electromagnetic frequency device, which at at the time, now we're all really getting informed and we have much more awareness around the power of frequencies, which is energy medicine. And they were amazing at the amount of information that I learned about the connection between emotions and disease,
Mm.
and confirmed my own feelings about doctors. And I was never a big person to run to the doctor unless of course I broke a bone, just personally.
Mhm.
And when I had my kids, I was very leery of doing certain things, standard sort of scheduled procedural things. And boy, oh boy, when I was exposed to their belief system and really how they lived, and it was just more confirmation and more education. 3 years of working for these beautiful Germans who were, treated not only the patient. If you came in with an elbow issue, they treated the whole body because it
Wow.
wasn't just about the elbow. You know,
Mhm.
and so that was one of my first forays into learning about dis-ease in the body.
Wow.
And so that was wonderful. And we were exposed to many different authors, Dr. James Oshman, Dr. Stephen Sinatra, Dr. Bruce Lipton. I mean, so many wonderful
Mhm.
doctors. We did a lot of medical conferences, but preventative medicine.
Wow.
Um, it was amazing, right? So all of this exposure and knowledge that came in that supported what I was already feeling. So it was the best education ever, best
Mm.
education ever. And they actually moved their headquarters back to Germany, but then it was time to move on. And so
Mhm.
the next stage of my life, opened up. But I certainly do believe that that had a big part to play, and confirmed what I had already felt
Mhm.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Not to go down that rabbit hole, but it almost seems like truth scares a lot of the big players at hand for many different reasons. And,
Yeah.
I'm glad right now we're not afraid of the truth and we're focused on, the healing versus just a continuity of symptoms. Um,
Yes. Yep.
and just the empowerment that people can have and the
Yeah.
correlationship of the mind, the body, the spirit, which is actually the radio station that my podcast is on, mindbodyspirit.fm. But
Nice.
yeah, cool. So
Yeah, that is.
Christine, we shared certainly a lot of your healing work, your near death experience, the lessons involved,
Yeah.
and obviously we know there, in terms we're driving this road together, there's no end to this road, but there's usually something around the corner. And I'm wondering for you, what's around the corner? Like anything, coming down the pipeline in terms of, potential books coming up or events coming up for you?
So, in my center, which is located in the Hudson Valley, New York, um, and we will have the website info, but I do offer many different workshops and events
Mhm.
of collective, like-minded, like-hearted individuals, whether it be sound healing, whether it be um, figuring out your life's purpose by
Mhm.
dealing with the soul chakra and doing some North Node astrology work. Also, we're bringing in some experts that will come in and give Reiki certifications. We do the core belief work. We just had that workshop with the individual. We had her come down from Massachusetts to do that. So I'm trying to bring in all of the wonderful pieces of nuggets of love and intuition and spirituality to offer to everybody here. As in terms of a book, I'm working on one, but I'm a slow writer. But I wanna talk about how we, the I won't give it away. I don't wanna give too much away, but we'll
Okay.
talk. It has to do with the body, and we'll leave it at that. So I'm gonna leave it there.
No, step by step. I look forward to keeping posted on your journeys and obviously the expansion of your center.
Yeah.
For those of viewers who do want to get in touch with you, um, you know, how would they find you? And also, do they have to go to the Hudson Valley area, or do you also do remote type work with people?
I do. So it's Heliotrope Holistic Healing.com. Heliotrope is a Greek word, and it means to follow the sun. Again, there's the flower connection there. So they do not have to come to the Hudson Valley, although it is a beautiful drive if they want to.
Oh, it is, especially this
But
time of year. Yeah,
it is, right? We're getting into that beautiful time.
yeah.
I do do remote sessions, intuitive healing sessions. I do wellness consultations and guided meditations for clients who want to choose any of that. And and it is I do love remote sessions as well as in person because it's a beautiful experience, and I've had so many different clients from all around the world, and it's been wonderful. And so I continue to serve as best I can, and with my spiritual team. And so, my spiritual team, of course, John is in there, and I do use the Christ consciousness and archangels, and I bring in all the big guns. I like to say, whoever can help, I'm bringing them in.
Oh, great. I say many heads are better than one head, as they say, but strength and power in numbers, and you have a lot of support, it seems, throughout your work. So I encourage my viewers to check out your website, your healing works, particularly those in the tri-state. Stay posted for events, coming, your way. But
Absolutely.
Christine, just a pleasure having you here as a guest in the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Look forward to following your work, and thank you so much for your generous time and your beautiful sharings of your NDE, lessons in it, and the beautiful healing work that you're doing in each and every day moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. You're making a difference. We all need to be making a difference, right? So this is great.
That's wonderful, Christine Dorsey. Thank you again for being my guest. A pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for tuning in to a fascinating conversation with Christine. I loved every moment of it, and I'm sure many of you really enjoyed Christine and what she had to say regarding lessons from a near-death experience, mind-body recommendations, a lot of insights from her own intuitive and healing work. So this was a very encompassing, informative, and yes, deeply wise conversation from Christine. So thank you for climbing the ladder of ascension here on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. It's an honor to have you here tuning onto my channel, and we look forward to having you come back soon for our next guest interview. Thank you all, and keep in touch.